Hello, welcome to Peniel. My name is George Falconer and this is Peniel. I recommend this book. I got it many years ago at the recommendation of someone else. When Heaven is Silent, written by Ronald Dunn. This basically is a book about suffering, and he knew about suffering. And sooner or later we all suffer in some way or another, and somehow God is in it. Life is not straightforward. God uses suffering, and this book certainly is a good commentary on the subject and will point you to passages of the Bible that you will find very helpful indeed. Ronald Dunn, When Heaven is Silent, highly recommended by me. I'm going to read the first chapter of Esther. This is what happened during the time of Xerxes, during the time of the Xerxes, who ruled over 127 provinces stretching from India to Kush. At that time King Xerxes reigned from his royal throne in the citadel of Susa, and in the 3rd year of his reign he gave a banquet for all his nobles and officials, the military leaders of Persia and Media. The princes of the nobles of the provinces were present. For a full 180 days he displayed the vast wealth of his kingdom and the splendour and glory of his majesty. When these days were over, the king gave a banquet lasting 7 days in the enclosed garden of the king's palace for all the people, from the last to the greatest, who were in the citadel of Susa. The garden had hangings of white and blue linen, fastened with cords of white linen and purple material, to silver rings on marble pillars. There were couches of gold and silver on a mosaic pavement of porphyry, marble, mother of pearl, and other costly stones. Wine was served in goblets of gold, each one different from the other, and the royal wine was abundant, in keeping with the king's liberty. By the king's command, each guest was allowed to drink in his own way, for the king instructed all the wine stewards to serve each man what he wished. Queen Vashti also gave a banquet for the women in the royal palace of King Xerxes. On the 7th day, when King Xerxes was in high spirits from wine, he commanded the 7 eunuchs who served him, Mehu, Bizha, Harbona, Bigtha, Agatha, Zethar, and Sarkas, to bring before him Queen Vashti, wearing her royal crown, in order to display her beauty to the people and nobles, for she was lovely to look at. But when the attendants delivered the king's command, Queen Vashti refused to come. Then the king became furious and burned with anger. Since it was customary for the king to consult experts in matter of the law and justice, he spoke with the wise men who understood the laws and were closest to the king: Karshia, Shethar, Abma, Tamanish, Meres, Marisena, and Mepukan, the 7 nobles of Persia and Media, who had been special access to the king and were highest in the kingdom. According to law, what must be done to Queen Vashti, he asked. She has not obeyed the command of King Xerxes that the eunuchs have taken to her. Then Mebucan replied to the presence of the king and the nobles, Queen Vashti has done wrong, not only against the king, but also against all the nobles and the peoples of all the provinces of King Xerxes. For the queen's conduct will become known to all the women, and they will despise their husbands and say, King Xerxes commanded Queen Vashti to be brought before him, but she would not come. This very day the Persian and Median women of the nobility who have heard about the queen's conduct will respond to all the king's nobles in the same way. There will be no end of disrespect and discord. Therefore, if it pleases the king, let him issue a royal decree, and let it be written in the laws of Persia and Media, which cannot be repealed, that Vashti is never again to enter the presence of King Xerxes. Also, let the king give her royal position to someone else who is better than she. Then, when the king's edict is proclaimed throughout all his vast realm, all the women will respect their husbands, from the least to the greatest. The king and his nobles were pleased with his advice, so the king did as Memucan proposed. He sent dispatches to all parts of the kingdom, to each province in its own script, and to each people in its own language, proclaiming in each people's tongue that every man should be ruler over his own household. In this day and age, that sounds a bit extreme, doesn't it? But it's not. It was the creative order. Now, let me say at the start, Esther is an unusual book, because, God is not directly mentioned at all in the book. Instead, God is revealed through providence in the things that happen. God is behind providence. He's ordering everything. That's a mystery to us when we see so much suffering and things apparently going wrong. And things started going wrong in this case. Very wrong indeed. And yet we'll see in subsequent videos that God was still behind it all. So God rules in providence. And this book is really about providence and how God rules. The king might have ruled over all these nations, ruled over a vast amount of the earth. But you know what? God rules over the universe because he made it. He is the King of Kings, and he will never be usurped. We are told that he ruled over a vast kingdom, so there were many languages. He decided he would have a banquet. And there was 180 days where he showed his great wealth and power to the whole of his kingdom. Now bear in mind, he wasn't just ruling over one country. He was ruling over an empire. And this was demonstrating the king's power over his empire. And all the nobles and the military commanders would be there to see his wealth and influence and power. And they would be saying, what a powerful king we have, what a powerful empire we have. Things are good, and we're so thankful we have such a powerful king. And he rules over us, and we have to obey him, and he influences everybody. There's not a life in this kingdom that he doesn't rule over. At the end of the 180 days, he threw a banquet, and the banquet wasn't just dinner time. The banquet lasted for 7 days. Now, I don't know with any certainty if the 180 days of him showing his wealth and the 7th day of the banquet are symbolic. Often in the Bible, numbers are symbolic. So you've got 180 and 7. And perhaps if anyone can tell me, are they symbolic? And if so, what for? Let me know. Anyway, this banquet lasted 7 days. And at the end of the banquet, he decided to call the queen, Vashti. Now, Vashti had also thrown a banquet for the ladies in the palace, so I presume that her banquet was also very exquisite, and I'm guessing it also lasted 7 days. So, there's all this feasting going on and all the drinking out of golden goblets, and each man receiving the sort of wine that he wanted. Everyone's having a great time. They've had 180 days of really enjoying themselves. Nothing was spared. It must have cost a fortune. People must have travelled from far and wide to be there. So on the seventh day, the last day, that's when the king commands. He sends the eunuchs to go and fetch Queen Vashti, wearing her crown. And she is a stunningly beautiful woman. He wants to see the queen. This is, if you like, the symbol of his power. Her wearing the crown, and people would see her and say, what a beautiful woman the queen is. And just look at the crown on her head. Isn't it absolutely magnificent? That was the plan. But the plan didn't work. Instead, what we see is the unfolding of another plan, God's plan. And it just starts here in this first chapter. The 7 eunuchs delivered the order to the queen, and she said no. We're not told why she said no, but it wasn't very wise. She had everything. She had access to the king, she had riches, she had servants, she had a place to live. She had everything that any person, any woman would want, waited on hand and foot. All she had to do was go with her crown on, and presumably with her best clothes, to the king in front of all the nobles from all over the empire, and let them see her. And she just had to present herself before the king and be humble before him. That's all she had to do. Just one thing. She didn't want to do it though. I'm just guessing that she started to think too much of herself and thought she'd get away with this. And think, on this one occasion I can't be bothered. So no. The king was very angry indeed. But he didn't just lash out. He called together the people who were effectively the lawyers, people who understood the law, and they were wise men. And it was a custom to do this. When we're making difficult decisions, it's a good idea to get heads together, people who are experts in whatever the subject is that we need to discuss, rather than just rely upon our own abilities. This king called together the people he needed to advise him on what to do about Vashti. And it was a custom, not a law to call them, but it was a custom. So he called them together. And finally, one of them said, it will get out. The whole of the kingdom, the whole of the empire will hear what has happened, because we've got all these people here who represent the empire. They'll go back and say, the queen defied the king. The queen defied her husband. And there'll be consequences about that, because every woman will defy her husband all over the empire. We can't have that. So, this is what you should do. You should issue an edict that cannot be revoked. Note that. Once this law is written, it cannot be revoked. So the ability to revoke it would be written into it, saying the king, even the king, cannot revoke this new law, saying that Vashti was never again to appear before the king. All she had to do, remember, is just appear on this occasion, and she didn't. So now she's told you're never allowed to appear before the king again. You have lost everything. Everything you cherish has just been lost because of a foolish act. The experts then said that every person, every man in the kingdom would be despised in his own household because of what she's done. If the queen can get away with it, so can they. So the king decides this is what he'll do. Now I'm guessing that when this edict went out, and it was sent out all over the empire in various languages, telling them every man had to rule his own household. Now that doesn't mean that you're a dictator, because you have to be a team, you have to cooperate. And I think that's what he's saying. He's really saying that every man has to be respected in his own household. A long time ago, a former minister of mine, whom I consider to be a wise man, said this. He said, when you're married, there are times when you don't agree about things. And if you're going to do something and one of you's got one view about how to do things, and the other's got a different view about how to do things, and you can't agree, the arrangement is this. The man has got 51% and the wife has got 49%. So the man has a casting vote. And then he gave this advice about how to use the casting vote, the 51%. He said, if you can't agree about how to do things, wherever possible, say, okay, we can't agree on how to do things my way or your way, so we do it your way. And that way you're still a team. Your wife isn't resenting you. Sometimes it's wise to use your power to enable the other person and not to use it selfishly. Do it your way. And I'm sure that's what this king was trying to bring about. He's trying to enforce respect for husbands throughout the kingdom. And in turn, husbands, you have to love and respect your wives. It's not a dictatorship. This chapter sets the scene for what was to lie ahead in the rest of the book. And we'll come to that in the videos yet to come.